Hey, welcome everybody. Hello, hello. Hello, my friends. Take your favorite seat. I am so excited to be here with you guys today. I'm going to silence my phone. I don't know how that happened. But anyway, I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you for joining me on another installation of The Conversation. We've been having a conversation since May. We've talked about what is awakening and what is truth, what is the world. And today we are going to talk about what is your path. And it was interesting when I first started to contemplate what I'd be sharing with all of you today. There was a clear pointing that it didn't say, what is the path? It said, what is your path? And so I decided to take it from the perspective of a personal self for a moment, just for the beginning. And what I would like to do is share with you today a little bit about my journey and the path that consciousness has appeared as a me on this path, and some of the pointings that I've had along the path that at the time I did not recognize as taps on the shoulder from awareness. But, hindsight is 2020. And looking back now, I can see that consciousness has wanted to get to know itself through this one for a very long time. And I am so very grateful to be here. So I just wanted to start by centering together with just a little opening prayer about why we're here and what we're doing. I'd just like to express gratitude for the joining of these gatherings, for the truth that comes through each of us, for all the beings that are my teachers. I'm looking at many of them right now. Reflections of consciousness. Cindy, I love you so much. So what is your path? So it became a reflection on this one's path. And the angle that it became kind of an overwhelming theme as I looked at the steps of this one's existence has been from small self-reliance with a small s to self-reliance with the big S. Self-reliance to self-reliance to the truth. And this life path has been perfect. I see that today. What I've come to understand about the truth is that judgments such as good and bad and difficult and hard and great and exuberant are just all labels from the mind, trying to make objects and other things separate. And then that judgment causes that separation. So how I look at it today, coming all the way to this moment right now at 4 minutes past the hour, is that this life has been the perfect path to awakening. So I took a review of being called, some poignant moments along my journey, which gave glimpses. But as I said, for a long time, I didn't even know what those were. And I didn't desire the truth because I didn't know what the truth was. So there was no desire for that. I was in the world, and I was conditioned by two very loving parents. I was adopted. I was special. I was an only child. And I was never told no. And that's how the world was for me. Nobody was going to tell me no. I was going to figure it out. I was always going to figure it out. I was in the world. I was doing worldly stuff. I was a typical high school student. I went off to college. I started a great career. You know, I'm married. I have children. My goals were very conditioned. They were programmed and they were very worldly. And there's nothing wrong with those goals. But as getting glimpses of an awakened being, I see today how limiting those were and how separating those were and how alone this one felt for a very long time. She felt, I have to figure this out. Self-reliance. At 21, I had a budding career in television. I was in production. I worked for a major TV facility and program. I worked for a science documentary series. And it was everything that I loved. It was a combination of visual and science and everything. And I was feeling like I was in my heyday. I moved to the big city of Boston. I was a tiny fish in a big pond. And not only did I have a budding career in television, but I had a budding career in alcoholism. And in that big city, being that little fish, my alcoholism, along with a drug addiction, consumed me. I lost all sense of self. The lists of things that were required for my job were pages and pages and pages long. And I was a people pleaser and I didn't know how to tell people no. And so it ate me alive. I lost all sense of self to the point where I remember looking in the mirror and not recognizing the reflection that was looking back at me. There was this sense of looking into these eyes and saying, who am I? Where did you go? You know, my dreams and goals that I told you about before were being stripped away. And I didn't have the power to stop it. I was powerless. My world was very hazy. It was very black and white. And during this time, a girlfriend that I was very close to started reading some of the Seth material, if anybody is familiar with that, by Jane Roberts. And I bought a couple of those books and I started reading them. And my brain was so scrambled that I couldn't comprehend any of it. So about 4 years into this, it was about 8 years long that I was living in Boston and circling this drain and trying to figure it out on my own. One night I heard in my head, the gig is up. You have to tell somebody. And it was my voice, but it wasn't my voice. It was the first intuitive message that I received from the heart. And I followed that message and I heard it. And that's when I entered into recovery. And that was May of 1997. I haven't found it necessary to pick up a drink of alcohol or use any of that other stuff to change the way I feel since then. I became very active in the program of recovery. Now, with the first day that I went to one of these recovery meetings, somebody came up to me at the end and said, it doesn't matter where you're at on the God thing. When you get home tonight, just hit your knees and say thank you to nothing in particular for keeping you sober today. And tomorrow morning, before you do anything else, hit your knees and say, please keep me sober to nothing in particular. And then you come to these meetings. And that's how it started. to nothing in particular. I had been raised Catholic. I had a cousin who was a born-again Christian. And by the time I was 13, I didn't want any part of it. Thank you very much. I'll figure it out. So this was bringing me back. And what they told me early on was that I didn't have to rely on the God of my understanding from my childhood, that a new, larger, greater being cared for me deeply, loved me even, and that I could develop a relationship with that. So that was the beginning of the softening of the heart, the beginning of a relationship, of desiring a relationship, because from the day I started that prayer, I was able to keep the plug in the jug. And so I knew that there was something very interesting going on here. And so through working what we call the 12 steps, I started turning my will and my life over to this power. And as I studied the literature in the program, there were some really great pointings, one of which that says deep down within us is the fundamental idea of God. Within me? You mean it's not out there? Very interesting. I started to hear things like, yeah, you've got a divine spark. It's already in you. But how do I access that? I allowed this power greater than myself to deal with my alcoholism. And this one took care of everything else. I'll figure it out. So I became what I thought was a great manager of my life. Right? There's no more drinking, no more circle in the drain. You know, so many wonderful things happened after I joined that program. One of the wonderful things was that I had my son in 2000. And then I had my daughter in 2002. And at this time, I was 5 years into the program. If you haven't heard my story before, Kylie was a full-term baby. All the appointments and everything went fine. And when she was born, it was discovered within a few months that she had profound cerebral palsy. Cerebral palsy is a movement disorder that has its onset before the age of 3 and can include a million different variations. My daughter's variation is something that did not allow her to develop orthopedically, physically beyond 6 months old. So she has no use of her hands or legs, or she can't sit up. She uses a wheelchair. And so there I was, 5 years away from that complete hell that I had been living in Boston. Now I was living in the Carolinas with 2 little children. And the question that I asked God was, I got sober for this. It was devastating. The story that this one had in her head was not matching what she was seeing that was actually happening. And the grief and the resentment began to well up. Well, I'll fix this, I thought. I'll find the right doctor. I'll find the right therapy. I'll find the right medicine. We flew all over the country, seeing the best specialists that were available. And guess what? Kylie still had cerebral palsy. Now, a lot of great things happened because of all that intense therapy that we did. She is able to sit in a wheelchair today. She is able to talk. She's cognitively there. She's pretty smart, actually. But I was devastated. And at this time, I was not much of a meditator, but meditation is part of the 12-step recovery program. And I was practicing things like visualization and using an imaginary vacuum to suck up the thoughts in my head because they were so overbearing. And one day, as I was sitting still, which I didn't do very often at this time, I heard two words: patient miracles. And I knew it had to do with my daughter. And I had no idea what that would look like. And of course, this one thought, oh, she's going to change. It's going to get better. Oh, yeah, that was a gift. That was a sign. And it didn't. And for the next 15 years, I spent staying sober. And Kylie became my number one focus. I was absolutely consumed. So all I thought about from the minute I got up, and I was walking around in my household holding my breath at any moment, thinking something could go wrong. She would get hurt, you know. And I, on the inside, was getting sicker and sicker. About 2015, somehow, the book A Course in Miracles, the blue book, showed up at my house. I have no recollection how it got here. And because of that, I did the first few lessons, and I carried around one of those lessons in my wallet for a couple of weeks because something was going on with another person. And I just kept saying, I'm giving all the meaning that I can to this. I'm giving all the, and I didn't even know what I was doing. But that situation came and went, and I didn't suffer that much. And I joined Facebook around that time. And so I started following a couple of ACIM pages. And I would read it, and I didn't know what any of it meant. My desire at that time was to fix Kylie. I thought if I fix Kylie, then I will be okay. And between 2015 and the beginning of 2020, Kylie got sicker and sicker physically. She started having grand mal seizures. I almost lost her, right? There was a point where I was discussing the situation with a very dear friend of mine, and I came to that realization that she was either God was gonna take her or not, and that I was powerless over that. And so I said a prayer of acceptance. I said, God, I'm willing, whatever you decide. And she came home from the hospital, and we found some medicine to regulate those seizures. And at the beginning of 2020, I was talking with that same friend, and I said, Maureen, I just want a little joy in my life. I feel trapped, And what was happening too is I was going to those recovery meetings every single day for many, many years. And because my focus became Kylie, I started cutting back on that too. Sick, worried, disturbed, anxious, resentful, grievances, fences, walls. That was all part of my life. And really, there was something inside that just wanted a little joy. And I was not one that really used that word at that time. So it was interesting to look back today and realize consciousness reaching out with that message. You can have joy. So COVID hit and the world shut down. And so did my meetings. And then all the meetings went on Zoom. So I learned how to use Zoom. And I was still on Facebook. And one day I clicked on something and I joined the 40-day program with Lisa Natoli. Right? And that was the beginning of finding a little bit of joy in this one's life. So Lisa was pointing to looking at thoughts to see how it was the thinking that was trapping me. And the lessons that she was proposing through ACIM was not to fix anything out there, to turn inward. And it asked for 40 days trying not to fix or change anybody else. And I was like, oh, don't know if I can do that. But I really dove in and I made a commitment. And I decided that I would focus on healing here rather than trying to fix what I was seeing on the outside. And through that program and through those lessons, I learned some things, let me tell you. I learned that I'm not guilty. I learned that I'm not wrong. I learned that I am not innocent. I learned that I am the light of the world. And there was something on the inside that believed it. Something knew that to be true. There was a knowing. And I had never heard anybody use the word know that way before I came to these teachings. There was a knowing. And I was like, yeah, it's like something I didn't learn in a book, but it's already there. And all I needed was another reflection to tap into it. So I completed the 40 days and I wasn't done. I wanted more. So I started doing the non-dual translations of the ACIM lessons with Bill Free. And he took all the Christianity out of it. So it was great, you know. I was still referring to God for a long time as good, orderly direction. You know, I didn't want to use that term. And what I started to understand very quickly were that words are so limiting. They pigeonhole. We may use them so we know what each other's talking about. Like when I say Kleenex, you all know what I mean, you know, but it's the vibration behind the word. The other thing that Bill Free brought to me, and it's a teaching of Rupert's, it's about awareness that I'm not this body. I'm not this avatar. In fact, I could look at it like a movie character and watch the Rona character in all her busy doings. And that space, that little bit of space, stepping back as an observer, helps so much. Awareness is like the screen of a movie. It's there all the time, but we don't notice it. The things that are projected on that movie rise on the screen. So the things that are happening here are just rising. They're just happening. So can I drop these labels of good or bad? And can I start to look at life as if it's happening? During my wonderful year with Bill, I also took more classes. I found myself wanting to be involved daily with these teachings. It was like I was being called. And that was something that was referred to in some of the early gatherings. If you're here, it's not a mistake. You've been called. And man, that felt so good, you know? And during one of these courses, I was introduced to Rupert Spira. And he talks about awareness as being what I truly am. I am not this body. I am the awareness. And so Cindy has a quote that she's going to put up for us from Rupert that I wanted to share with you guys because it was such a poignant turning point for me. And Rupert says, happiness is simply to allow everything to be exactly as it is from moment to moment. Thank you, Cindy. So that is what I started to practice in my household. Allowing everything to be. Allowing Kylie to be as she was, however she was, whatever involuntary movements were happening that day, whatever events were happening. And what I also started to do during this time was to see Kylie differently. I started to see that this being was exactly the divine expression that consciousness wanted to appear as. And Lisa Natoli had asked me a question about, I know why Kylie is disturbing to you, but what are you grateful for? And that gratitude list helped so tremendously. And I learned about resting as awareness. I learned about the pause. I learned that I could feel the disturbance start to arise. And because I am not the disturbance, I can be aware of that disturbance. I can observe that disturbance. And I can rest in a holy instant and then proceed from there. And that is what I started to do with Kylie. Each time I would approach her or approach her bedroom door, I would pause, get myself centered, and just sink into who I am. And what started happening was that all the busy doings were just arising in the I am, in awareness, changing pull-ups, feeding her, making her comfortable, changing the channel on her iPad. Those were just happenings. And who was the one that was getting disturbed about that? I could see her. I could see what I truly am was not her. And there began to be a space between what was happening in the interaction with her and what I was thinking and doing. There was a softening. There was a gentleness. There was an appreciation. And there was a love. Everything started changing. And around this time, it has just occurred to me, is when my dear friend Cindy said, hey, do you want to do an awareness podcast? We're going to talk about the characteristics of the teachers of God. I was like, I've only done the lessons. I haven't read the text. She's like, it doesn't matter. You're fine. And what that allowed me to do was really sink in. So what I'd like to point to as I go along here was that once the desire to know the truth of what I am became the desire above all else, and it was very early on, or maybe early on in these teachings for me, but at the end of 2020, that's what it became. Everything came to me that was needed to awaken. Everything. By the end of the time we got through those 12 podcasts, I was like, well, shoot, this is all becoming a little clearer to me now. And then, of course, the voice says, who's me? Who thinks they're awakening? So interesting. Another thing that came along in my path was Susan Telford. If you haven't been exposed to Susan's poetry, I highly recommend you look her up. And I spent some time with Susan, and I thought Susan was way too squishy. And what Susan taught me was to drop in the heart. And that's what I mean by squishy. Her love, right? Oh, honey, it's okay. She taught me how to pause and give that inner disturbance, the child in there, some real love and some real space and some real patience. Her counsel and her poetry opened my heart so much. Another thing I wanted to mention was Michael Singer's Untethered Soul. That came onto my path. Wow. Inner roommate. If I could kick them out of my house, I would. But these teachings give me a way to do it. I can say, inner roommate, your days are numbered. Ego, you're not in charge anymore, because I know the truth of what I am, and your days are numbered, baby. So this path to discovering who and what I truly am brought enlightenment. And I love the definition that I've been given for enlightenment. It's just a recognition of the truth. And it started with me not even understanding clearly what truth meant. But awakening is for everyone. We have it with us innately here in this consciousness appearing as this body. It is this communication device, this avatar is fully equipped with the innate ability to connect with consciousness, with what I truly am, to step back from the world. So consciousness has brought this one to the inward path. No more looking out there for happiness. You are the happiness you seek, says Rupert. So now I'm going to share a Joseph Campbell quote with you, if Cindy would put that up. This is another teacher who came along way before I got into the rooms of recovery. And boy, I thought he was fascinating. But again, the mind was too muddy to be able to understand. This quote came to me as I was preparing for this. It's like Joseph Campbell reached out from consciousness and gave me this so I could share it with you. If you can see your path laid out in front of you step by step, you know it's not your path. Your own path you make with every step you take. That's why it's your path. Thank you, Cindy. So there's been an opportunity of studying great teachers, reading amazing books, attending workshops, sanghas, they're all pointing to the same truth. But to say that I've put my eggs in all one basket, one path, one teacher, I wouldn't be honest. In fact, what has become apparent is day by day, the teaching that is needed is available to me. Courses that I take are from inner guidance. Everything points to the same truth, the recognition of who I truly am, and that this awakening is available to anyone. When I first started hanging around, I heard a lot about these Indian sages and these masters and going to ashrams, and a couple of our group even went to India, and I don't know, there's not that desire here. But I want to tell you that's okay, because awakening can happen for the householder. The domestic goddess that I am, awakening can happen right here. And as this one's path has been revealed, I have been introduced to Ramana Maharshi, as I'm sure many of you are familiar. And I'd like to share a quote with you now from him, and Cindy's going to put that up for us. And here it is. You are all searching for the silence of the mountain, but you're looking for something outside. This silence is accessible to you right now inside the center of your own being. Thank you, Cindy. So this awakening is available right now, wherever one finds oneself, in whatever environment one finds oneself. And the truth is, the one that this one finds, the work that I've been asked to do in this dream world, is the perfect situation for awakening. Any disturbance, I can pause, remember the truth, take a holy instant, and proceed from there. Proceed with guidance from there. It's inside. Right now, I'm reading a Ramana book, and it's the spiritual teaching of Ramana Maharshi. Look at his beautiful face. He's so cute. And his eyes are filled with love. I'd like to give you a bit of an annotated quote from this book that really, really describes what I'm trying to point to here. The mental obstacles are always there for you. It is no help to change the environment. The one obstacle is the mind. It must be got over, whether in the home or in the forest. If you can do it in the forest, why not the home? Your efforts can be made even now, whatever the environment might be. The feeling I work is the hindrance. Ask yourself, who works? Remember who you are. Then the work will not bind you. It will go on automatically. And that has been what has been being revealed. The work, which can include for this one, caregiving for her mom who lives with her daughter who lives with her son and husband, 2 cats and a dog, laundry, cooking, bills. What I used to think was extraordinarily irritating and mundane has become the work to awaken to that which I truly am. In any moment, I can zoom out as awareness and focus on the beauty and love and the opportunity that I get to have in this walk, which has been perfectly designed for this one, a divine expression of consciousness. And I am so grateful that consciousness kept tapping me on the shoulder. And I'm grateful for all the identities that I've worn, because today I see what I truly am. And all those characters are just part of the dream. So I'll leave you with this. Rest. Be still. Practice being the self as the self. See the doer dissolve. Allow life, awareness, consciousness to be recognized and to flow wherever you find yourself. Thank you, everybody. So I'm looking forward to anything that this talk has brought up for you. Any questions you might have, I'd be happy to answer. And as always, just so grateful to be here among those that I love so much. You can feel free to raise your electronic hand or just unmute. So I have a question. I'm curious if anybody had similar experience before coming to these teachings, but recognizing now that there were glimpses, that there were knocks at the door, that there were taps on the shoulder. And I would love for you to share that path with us, or those glimpses with us, if you feel. Thank you for resting in love. Sandra, come on down.
Yes. Yes, I have had similar experiences, but I don't feel like I want to explain them. I just want to say that was so beautifully moving that it's hard to say anything after all that you said. All I can say is wow and thank you.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you for being on this walk with me.
So beautiful, so honest, so insightful, so self-aware, and when you speak, your love just penetrates.
Thank you. I love being here with you, growing together. Would anybody else like to share? Hi, Cindy.
Hey, Rona. I don't know what I'm going to say,
Thank you.
but I came on down just to keep you company.
Thank you.
And so anybody else raise your hand at any time. I used to listen to speaker talks a lot, and they just bring you into another space. Yeah. And I've heard bits and pieces of your story over and over and over again. Just very moved. But I do have a pointed question while we're waiting for somebody else to share, because everything about what you shared about your path was about you. Yeah. I and especially since you and I we're holding space for a 40-day group right now. So I'm gonna be the facilitator, and within, so many of the questions of people that have been coming through to us, they're like, isn't it like you've talked from your point of view, right? So could you take a few minutes now, just for the record, and talk about the shifts in your daughter's life,
Okay.
even from like the end of the 40-day on, because that was 4 years ago, right?
Right.
And your daughter is pretty vibrant and alive and amazing now. Could you talk a little bit about, maybe her, even your son, your husband, the chickens, whatever? Like, there are a whole bunch of people there that have been shifting and changing as a result of you being selfish about your own awakening. It would be a great addition to this story.
Sure. I'd be happy to share with you. Well, as I said, Kylie started to change, when I started to do some of the internal work myself. And she got physically better. And the grand mal seizures stopped. They were able to find medication to allow her to live, a typical life. And what she started to do was thrive, and she started to do these experiments, just kind of seeing what kind of different foods affected her body and things like that. Because one of the things that she has are involuntary movements and stiffness. It's called spasticity and dystonia. So, she had been hearing me say, I am not a body, I am free, I am as God created me. So she started saying that too. And over time, like when she would be having what we call a wiggy moment, what she would do and still does is she would just start to repeat, I am. And as she repeats, I am, you can see everything in the body just calming down. And so it's really incredible to see that process. So she started doing these science experiments, right? Like removing different foods and whatever. And the truth is she was right on. We removed all dairy products at her behest. She's like, let's try it for 30 days. So we tried it for 30 days and things started getting better. And she said, let's just keep going. And so that's just one example of little experiments that she comes up with now. on her own through her own intuitive guidance to make her life doable, so it's been very interesting. My son, he's still home with me and he helps me with Kylie. And he's 24. And for a long time, I thought, this kid's got to go to school and get out of my house. But that's not how Ryan is appearing. And what has happened was originally I used to say that I brought up two only children because Ryan was quite what I thought was afraid of Kylie, and he spent a lot of time in his own space. And so the two of them were like completely separated, never talked. He never talked to her or anything. Well, since 2021 and doing this work, my son is now one of Kylie's caregivers. He interacts with her all the time. He speaks with her. He drives her places. I mean, it's just been an incredible transformation for him as well. He got some counseling, and what I found out was that he felt very helpless when his sister was growing up. And so he was just trying to stay out of the way and not be a bother. I thought it was resentment. And so I'm so grateful to have discovered that. And he and I have a wonderful relationship today. It's just so wonderful to have him here as an adult and be able to express. We just had to help our dog transition a week ago, and to be able to be present for my son who expressed some very deep emotion and feelings, and again, I didn't try to fix it. I was there. I held space for him. I was with him. And now, I mean, he comes up for hugs from me all the time, and it's just so beautiful. And then I will let you know with my husband. In the last couple of years, he has developed this like woodworking craftsmanship that you would not believe. My entire backyard is full of Adirondack chairs and picnic tables and planter tables. And he made me a bookcase. And I mean, and then just last week, he gave me a jewelry box that he made. I mean, ornate, detail, blah, blah, blah. And I mean, I didn't know he had any of this in him. So the joy that is coming through this one, working on this one, is expanding everywhere. I mean, those are just a couple of examples. I could go on with my chickens, with my relationship with my best friend, how that has changed and shifted and turned so beautiful. There's just an array of evidence that a simple pause and recognition of what I truly am can change what I see in the world. So I hope I hit on a few things you were looking for, Cindy, but I'm inspired to hear what Melanie has to say.
Oh, thank you. There we go. Oh, thank you, Rona. It's hard to articulate, how powerful your sharing is with all of us. And you can see how connected we all are, and how, your experience ripples through us, through all consciousness. Mm-hmm. And it's so powerful. And I love the quote from Joseph Campbell. And you really live that, because every moment is who we are, and it's always now. And it's just so cool that the spontaneity, and you never know. Every moment brings infinite possibility, infinite potentiality, and you really showed that. Yeah, how how things have, it's just so cool when you open up to that possibility. It just comes through, and it comes through you and to all of us. So I'm not very good at putting things into words, but I guess you get what I mean. It comes from within. So
I absolutely do, Melanie, and I just adore you and thank you. And I just love the infinite potentiality, right? Isn't that our jam over the last few weeks about just, you don't know how it's going to happen, right? Be curious. Yeah. Be curious about it. There's a richness to life now.
Yeah, oh, so cool. And
Yeah.
it's so cool that, just the fact that we're all here together now. I mean, we're all from all different parts of the world even, and to connect this way and the ripple effect out everywhere. So I just love it. So thank you.
Thank you. So beautiful. I love being with you. Thank you. Well, there's a couple of minutes. Otherwise, we could wrap things. Oh, iPhone, thank you for putting that in the chat. When I'm healed, I'm not healed alone. That is so true. That is so true. Well, I would just like to express my gratitude for you all taking time out of your day to gather here so we could remember the truth as one, and I look forward to seeing you all again in a future gathering, and I hope that's very soon.